I know that we all have at-risk students. I just tend to work in places where I have 100% at-risk students. So I have a lot of experience with them, and I think that while we all know a lot about them, it's good to be reminded of particular things about them. But I wanted to start with this little video that I think is a really great comedic play on how awkward we can be as teachers when we are not super connected to our particular populations. Is there no sound?
Should be. Double check.
I'm y'all substitute teacher, Mr. Garvey. I taught school for 20 years in the inner city, so don't even think about messing with me. Feel me? Take a roll here. Jay Quellen. Where's Jay Quellen at? No Jay Quellen here?
Do you mean Jacqueline?
Y'all want to play. Okay, man. Come on, you Jay Quellen. Balake. Where is Balake at? No Balake here today. Yes, sir.
My name is Blake.
Are you out of your goddamn mind? What? Do you want to go to war, Balake? You could go to war. I'm for real. I'm for real. Check yourself. Do nice. Do nice. One of y'all says some silly ass name. This whole class is gonna feel my wrath. Now, D nice.
Do you mean Denise?
Right now.
Denise?
Say it right.
Denise?
Correctly.
Denise?
Right.
Denise?
Right.
Do you nice?
That's better. Hey, Ron. Where is Ron right now? No Ron, huh? Well, you better be dead or mute, Ron. Why didn't you answer me the first time I said it? Huh? I'm just asking you. I said that 4 times, so why didn't you say it the first time I said Ron?
Because it's pronounced Aaron.
You don't want to stop it, Aaron? Well, take your ass on down to Oshag Hennessy's office right now and tell him exactly what you did. Oshag Hennessy!
Principal O'Shaughnessy?
Get out of here! Insubordinate and churlish. Timothy.
Present.
I just think this is a wonderful example of how we can just be super disconnected from what's happening in our own room. And we've all done roll, and it sucks. So I thought I'd start out with something a little lighthearted. Obviously, talking about at-risk youth can be a bit of a downer, and I'm going to try not to drag you all into the total depths of despair. But it is a very serious topic, and these kids are really, really in need. They have great, big needs. But I wanted to start with just the basic definition. I didn't actually know what the definition of at-risk was. I knew who was at risk, I knew all my kids were at risk, but how are we defining at risk in our actual halls or annals of education, or who are the big guys that are doing this? I don't know. But it's defined as a student who, by virtue of their circumstance, is statistically more likely than others to fail academically. So those can be a number of circumstances, but usually they're circumstances that are out of their control. We tend to focus on ethnic minorities, but that is not the entire list for at-risk youth. You could be academically disadvantaged, you could be economically disadvantaged, you could have a low socioeconomic class or status. We have students who are on probationary status, they're considered at risk. We could have students who have any past behavioral problems, those are considered at-risk students. When I looked at the specific list on the education website, like the big one, I can't think of the national whatever, it lists low socioeconomic status, living in a single-parent home, which I thought was like, every kid who lives in a single-parent home is considered at risk, regardless of how awesome that home is. They are still an at-risk child. Changing schools at non-traditional times, considered at risk. Below average grades in middle school. This one was super specific. If you have a below average grade in middle school, you are considered more statistically likely to fail in high school. Being held back in school is considered an at-risk marker. Having older siblings who left high school before completion. So you can be doing awesome, and you're still considered at risk because of your older siblings' choices. So I think that these are really interesting to hold in your mind when you think of your at-risk student. Try and think of the big picture and all of these children that fit into this particular bucket. I think when we hear at risk, we think of one or two particular kids in our room that are driving us out of our minds, or, in my situation, it's a lot of cursing. It might not be, a lot of you are elementary, so you probably don't have that happen to you, but maybe you do. So, these are the ones that are easily identified as at risk. But that doesn't mean that little, silent Timothy in the corner is not also at risk. So, I wanted to talk really briefly about this idea of stress and how it affects the brain. I'm really into the brain. I think it's fascinating. I talk to my kids about the brain all the time. But we all know about this, right? Fight or flight. We've heard about it 1,000 times. We've seen the picture of the caveman deciding if he's going to have a fight or if he's going to run away. But I think what's most fascinating about this is that when our children are under stress, the stress hormones turn off the part of their brain that allows them to focus, pay attention, understand ideas, commit information to memory, and reason critically. So if you have a student who is under stress, be it at home, be it because they're hungry, be it because they're exhausted, be it because somebody just bullied them in the hallway, be it because they're a type A child and they're super worried about their grade, they cannot remember what you said. They can't. Their brain won't do it. They cannot make a good decision because they cannot critically reason. It's not possible. They're not choosing not to. They can't. And that's really, really, really important to remember when we talk about our children. So let's talk about fight and flight and what it looks like in an art room. And I like to call the flight the sneak. Because our little sneak will avoid you at all costs. He will not fight you. That's not his response to his stress hormone. Instead, he will flight. He will sneak. So he will be the kid sitting in the back of the room. He will be the kid that has to use the bathroom 50 times. He will be the kid who pretends to work when you walk by and then sits there and stares into space for the rest of the time. He will be the kid who says, "Miss, I don't understand," 25 times, every time you say it. He will be the kid who will go, "Yes, yeah, miss, honey, are you working?" "Yep." "Okay, well, your paper's empty." "I know." "Okay, so are you gonna make something?" "Yep." "Mm-hmm. Okay, so baby, you just need more time." "Yep, need more time." He doesn't need more time. He doesn't want to do it, per se, because he's stressed out. He's trying to flee the situation, but he can't get up and run away from you, so he will mentally run away from you. We are more familiar with the fight, the roar. The roar often looks like, at high school level, I get a lot of, "F you, miss, make me." It's super fun. destroy other people's work, they destroy their own work, they destroy your materials. I'll never forget my very first day in DCPS, which is really intense, and my principal told me that day, well, this is your trial by fire. Have fun. Give them candy. That's what he said to me my first day. So I went into the classroom and I was all, yeah, I'm going to do this, it's going to be great. And I had no supplies, right? And it's DC, there's $0. So we had pencils and we had green printer paper, like the kind that you feed with the little thing that you rip off the side that like chug through. That's what we had. And the kids took one look at the paper and one look at the pencils, and then they snapped all the pencils in half and threw them at me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong field. Fortunately, I stayed. They will destroy your entire universe if you let them. They will also interrupt other people constantly. They will curse you out. They will refuse to work. And my favorite is, oh my God, miss, this is so stupid. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And I think you're dumb too. Devaluing everything that's happening around them. It's really hard to approach this, right? We're emotionally attached to what we're doing. We care about art. We love art. This is your universe. You should love this because I love this. You should value this because I value this. It's very hard to take a minute, step back, and think, why are you doing this? Is there a reason? Yes, there's always a reason. Our children are not just flying through the universe as a destructive ball of energy, hoping to catch you in your art room and destroy all your stuff. There's stuff going on with them. They have something that is making them this way. So we have to stop, and we have to back up, and we have to put our egos aside. We have to put our emotions aside, and we have to think, okay, what is going on here? And as my mom loves to tell me, if the emotional reaction does not fit the situation, it's because something else is going on. And that was really great advice to me. She told me that when I was a teenager, and I thought, okay, Mom, whatever. And now that I'm an adult, I think, wow, okay, so if somebody's blowing their fuse at me, and, I just offered them a cup of coffee, I think, okay, there must be something going on here that isn't about the cup of coffee. And when we think about our children, we think there's obviously all of these things that put them in this category. That's what's going on. So I decided to use images of my children and connect their reasons with their images to sort of help us think, when we look at these girls, you would not think that these things are going on. And they're not going to help you out. This girl here on the, what will it be for you? Right? This one. She was just a roar. Constant roar. F you this, F you that, art so stupid, how's this ever gonna help me in my life, blah, 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 blah. And, it took me a while because she was so roar. I love the roar. I'd rather have the roar than the sneak, I'll be honest. The roar is easier for me to deal with than the sneak. But she was a lot of roar. And it took a long time for me to finally sit down and be like, Destiny girl, what is this? What's going on? What? Are you mad at me? Did I do something? No. Eventually, it came out that her mom is always on her back. Always on her back. Always telling her how terrible she is, how bad she is at everything. Her mom would tell her, I wish I never had you. You're such a big mistake. You take up room in my house. I'd like you to move out now. It's because of you that I don't have a life. She's just constant. So by this point in her life, she don't want to hear anything any adult female has to say. Because she knows in her heart, eventually, I'm going to tell her that. And she cannot take the risk that she might actually like me, and then I'll turn around and do the same thing to her. I told you it was going to be a downer. I apologize. So, when we think about the whys, I always advise people to try to think in these three big categories. because I think, and this is a personal view, that there are generally 3 big reasons why they are roaring or they are sneaking. So I think of them as these. I don't understand what you're saying, or what I'm supposed to do, or why I'm here, why. I am afraid, and I don't like you. And these are all actually easily approachable in my opinion. Well, easy is relative. It's not easy, but it's good to know what's actually going on. So I think of I don't understand as the easiest to approach. I need more instruction. I need supports. I need you to go over the information again or differently. And differently is usually much more important than again. I need more steps to follow. So a lot of the time, especially in TAB, we get so into our freedom that we forget that some of our children are not ready for it. And it's not because they can't handle it. It's because they don't possess the tools to do the thinking we're asking them to do. And for my high school kids, it's that they had the tools somewhere along the line, and those got pounded out of them. And now they need a new set. Those tools are gone. So when we give them those structures, those supports, we give them an alternative version of what we're saying, or a new way, or we show them something new, they get the support they need, they get to work. This next one, I am afraid. This one's a little trickier. It has to do with their level of confidence. Again, as TAB is heavily dependent on a confident child. We need the child to feel like they have control and like they're willing to take risks, because art making is risk-taking. And an at-risk child does not feel like risks are a good thing, usually with a big reason why. A lot of risks have happened to them, and they've all been bad. So they're not feeling good about taking more risks. They'd like you to just tell them what to do. Because of this, we have to think of the ideas that maybe they failed in the past. Maybe they've been told they're a failure. They have a lot of experience with it. They're not ready to take these risks. So instead, as educators, we have to start building their confidence and giving them the ability to take the risk. Instead of just saying, no, you can do it, you're really fine. Just try. Just try is like the worst thing you can say to a kid who is in the I am afraid category. That's like putting him up on the top of the Empire State Building, putting a bungee cord around your waist, and saying, just do it. You'll be fine. You're good, right? Go ahead. You're not going to do that, probably. A couple of us will, but that's because we're confident. Most of us will be like, this is the terrible idea. No, thank you. The I don't like you category is about trust. Kids who say, I don't like you, I don't like this class, I don't like you. And at the high school level, a lot of the time, they will directly be like, I don't like you. Get out of my face, miss. Look at that it is. What they're really saying is, you don't understand me, or I'm afraid you don't understand me. You don't understand who I am. You don't understand my life. You don't get me. I had a kid just the other day who's only been coming to my class about, I've seen him I think like 6 times over the last 7 or 8 weeks. So we haven't had a lot of time to build a relationship. And another child asked me a question. I shouldn't say child, my babies are like 17, 18. And I answered the question, and this kid says, liar. I go, David, it's not a lie. It's true. It's like, you're a liar. Why do you think I'm a liar? Everyone's a liar. I go, well, I generally don't lie because I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. And if I don't want to tell you something, I will just say, I don't want to tell you that. And that's generally my approach. He goes, well, I think you're a liar. And you just told a lie. Because you lie. Okay, well, we're just going to have to disagree on this one, because I can't prove to you that I'm not lying by telling you I'm not lying, because you think that that's a lie. So, I don't know what to tell you. And he goes, well, if you aren't a liar, it's because you haven't had a bad enough life yet. think that's the key, right? Our children perceive life through what has happened to them. He cannot conceive of an adult that is not a liar. And he believes that lies protect you because life is so awful that you couldn't possibly get through it telling the truth. I think that the heart of what we want to talk about is the heart. When we approach children who are this full, this needy, we have to approach them with our heart all the way open. There can't be anything false in what we're doing. They will know right away, and your entire interaction will be useless. You have to be all the way open. And being all the way open is extremely challenging. And it's draining, and it's hard, and you have to set all the stuff that's going on in your life aside. And that's hard. What we do is hard. And there's no way around that. There's no way to say, well, if I give you these 6 steps, it will be totally easy. And you'll be like, step 1, gotcha, baby, let's go. There's no way to do that. It's hard work. You know, when Eric and I met, you know, Eric's been in jail for violent offense. He's a violent offender. And to not feel fear with him, and to not judge him, and to not resent him for what he's done to women, because I know what he's done, is challenging, because he's also a child. He's 16 years old. He's got a baby. He's got a family he's taking care of. He's a complicated person. We have to approach them completely and wholly, as all of what they are. We also have to remember that this is not about us. And I know we all saw this movie, or one of the many iterations of this movie. White lady goes to inner city school, white lady saves babies, etc., the end. We are not out to save, right? We're not here to save them. We're here to love them. And maybe our love will help them for a day, or a week, or a month. But we're not here to save them. It's not about us. And I remember watching this movie, I totally do, and I remember being like, oh my God, I'm going to be just like her. And, you know, you start your teaching career and you think, I'm going to do all these amazing things, and this is all about me, and oh my God. And I've totally done this. And sometimes I totally have to take a step back and be like, Keziah, this is not about you. It's not about how many babies you save or help or make feel better. This is about them. And what I have to offer them, to give to them if they want to take it. That's all this is. So that's basically who we're talking about. That's the understanding bit. Let's talk about the responding bit. And I cannot emphasize this part enough. Because of the lizard brain that's going on in our babies, because they are under stress, because they cannot hear you, because they cannot remember what you are saying, you have to say everything you are saying super articulately and many times. You have to spell out exactly what you mean. To the point of redundancy. This is not because our children cannot understand, it's because they are under stress. And this means their brain cannot work the same way as it does when they are not under stress. So you've got to say it super clearly. Such as, when you need to go to the bathroom, you need to raise your hand. Like this. I need to go to the bathroom. My hand is raised. In my class, they don't have to raise their hand to go to the bathroom. They can just leave. But that's because my children are old enough to be like, are you kidding me? Why would I have to ask permission to go to the bathroom? F you, will I? So, instead, it's a very combative environment. We have these very specific rules on other points in the room. But you've got to remember, they're not being defiant. They could not hear you. Inside of them, they are at war. If I gave you a command while you were in the middle of a battlefield, I would probably not expect a lot of return on that command, especially if the command had nothing to do with survival. And that's what our children are focused on, survival. We have the luxury to think creatively and beautifully and expansively, they need to get to dinner. They need to figure out where dinner is. It's a big difference. So be specific. Be crystal clear specific. Write it on the wall. Say it 25 times. Say it 25 times tomorrow and the next day. Model the interactions that you want to see. Obviously, right? Duh. Hearing it again and again really helps, but seeing it helps a lot more. Seeing you do it helps it even more. I frequently find myself telling children, Manuel, we are not fighting right now. I am trying to tell you something. We're not in conflict. I am not angry. I know that you are, so we're going to slow down. Articulating things for them. You know, when we heard that information about the words that children receive, you know, those how many words kids receive before 3 in different income households, guess how many kids in low-income households are seeing properly modeled emotional interactions? I guess that number's low. Instead, statistically, when we have kids whose immediate emotional reaction is to fight, to yell, to scream, they don't have the tool to do something else. So feeling angry at them because they are yelling at you does not help. Instead, helping them articulate how they're feeling helps a lot. If you've ever been around a toddler, and you learned this concept of toddlerese, where you talk to a small child, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, because they don't have the vocabulary that they need. And so you say things like, you're really mad right now. Oh, so mad. It's the same idea, just less insulting. I want to show you a very short clip of my room, because it gets really monotonous if it goes on and on and on. We do not have a rule against talking. Sometimes I get so bored. They're engaged. They're all working. As a general rule, I have 100% engagement. At-risk children need and crave this silence, this creativity, these moments to themselves. This is the biggest gift we can give them. But how do we get them there? That's a whole different thing, right? We know that this is a gift. We all value quiet time, creative time. And like I said, we don't have a rule against talking. They could totally talk if they wanted to. They don't want to. Not if they have something else they could do. Getting to there is a challenge, right? We all know this. Especially when it's 100% high-risk kids. There are a couple of things that I think really help us get there, and that's a lot of the things that we were talking about in responding. So temperature checks are really important, especially with children who have no idea how they're feeling. Checking in with them constantly helps them start to check in with themselves. High-risk students, at-risk students, do not always know when they're going to blow up. They don't feel it coming. They don't have enough emotional connections with themselves to be able to be like, wow, I'm starting to get really mad and frustrated. Maybe in like a couple of minutes I'm going to have a freak out, so I should probably just get up and walk around the room. Like that thought process, no way. There's no way that that's happening. Instead, they're like, everything's cool, oh my God, why is it not working? It's instant and out of control, and then they're out of control. So checking in with them all the time, and I mean all the time, like that's literally the only thing I have to do, right? Because they're working and they don't need me. So every couple of minutes I walk around and I'm like, hey, how are you? Is everything cool? Do you need me? Do you need anything? Okay, cool. And that's it. But I do that literally like every 5 minutes with every kid in the room. Some kids get really annoyed by this because they don't need this. So I also tell them, if you don't want me to bother you, just tell me no thanks, and I won't bother you. That usually works. I think being really straightforward and really, really, really transparent helps. Kids need to trust you. They need to know that you mean what you say, and that you're going to say everything, not just the stuff that you want them to hear. I don't know why I made this writing so tiny. Sorry. So, also, our kids have missed a lot of skill building. Tons of it, all of it, almost. A few years ago, was in a PD where they told me, when a child when a child is moved from one house to another, like let's say your parents bought a new house and you get to move, you lose 6 months of education. It's a 6-month loss. So now imagine that you had to move because your dad shot your mom and now you're living with your grandma. It's probably more than a 6-month loss. Imagine that this happens every year. Imagine that you move constantly, or constant traumatic events happen in your household. You are hungry every day. When did you have the time to learn all the skills of your peers? When was that time? You did not have that time. You did not learn those things. So those kids are falling into the I don't understand category. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. So we need to help them build those skills. We need to give them that information so that they can be on par and they can be successful. We need to scaffold what we are doing, especially because we are TAB. We've got to give them the stairs, the steps, the structures to get where we want them to go. They really don't have it. They're not being obstinate. They just can't do it. We need to help them. I also am a huge, enormous, gigantic proponent of culturally relevant and contemporary work. I don't think that you can make connections to children unless you show them something that they can make a connection to. I already talked about this art of the check-in. Poor little David, such a sweetheart. Went to rehab 3 times while I was teaching him. But Mr. Smiles, his sister was killed, and so he became an enormous alcoholic afterwards. And his work started out pretty neither here nor there, and then over the course of the 1.5 years that I had him, his work became deeply reflective of death, dying, and fighting death. So towards the end of his time with me, he made a beautiful piece that I don't have an image of because he took it immediately, of himself as a samurai warrior fighting an army of skeleton samurais in an effort to stave off his inevitable death and the death of his family. He's not dead at the moment that I know of. I realize that made it sound like he might be, but I don't think that he is. So I think it's really important to accept the current level of skill. Like I said, they are missing the years where they were building these skills. Maybe not physically, but mentally. So we need to actually accept what they are doing and validate what they are doing. I always tell people, you've got like a 3 to 4 project on-ramp before you're going to see something that has genuine emotional connection to the child and any real risk-taking on their part. So those first couple of things that come in, validate them, appreciate them for what they are, and wait for the day when you're going to see something that is genuine. Because it will come. You've just got to wait for it. Longer than you would for any other kid. Giving them supports. So I kind of added this part in after we talked yesterday. I hadn't initially planned to talk a lot about supports, but I think that it's a good idea. Because they're missing these ideals, the skills to think in the ways that we're asking them to. Giving them a structured and scaffolded supports is really important. So I put up this example of the idea cards that I keep in my room as part of the ideation station. And you can see that I have the 2 ends of the spectrum. Some of them are very low level, very much more like a command, right? Draw a shoe, draw the contents of a trash can, draw some flowers. Very straightforward commands. This allows them to choose their work. There's, hundreds of these. They can pick the one that they like the most. That gives them creative freedom, but it's a very specific command or idea. At the top end of the scale are the more abstract concepts. Obsession, drowning, that one's real popular. A lot of the death-themed ones are real popular. And pregnancy, really popular. Giving them this window where they can choose the level of heavy lifting and brain work that they have to do, I think is really important. But it also allows them to make these decisions independent of you. They don't have to rely on you or feel embarrassed by asking you, Miss, I don't know what to do, I don't have any ideas, or can you tell me what to do, can you give me an idea? They can do this all on their own. And it gives them the stepping stools to get to doing this all on their own. So here's another example of scaffolding that I use at the high school level. Actually, it's two examples. And obviously the writing is super duper tiny, so there's almost no way you can see what it is, but you can see that this over here is helping them plan a project. So you can see where they can draw their little sketches, but you can also see that there's where is your idea coming from, and then there's a support box that lists sentence starters of places ideas could come from. Sometimes when you ask this question, where did your idea come from, they're like, I don't know, I just had it. It was just there. Being able to track where your idea comes from is kind of a higher order level thinking. So we need to support being able to track that idea. So giving them these specific sentence starters, it was a dream, I saw something on the bus on the way here, my friend has a really cool video game that I thought was amazing. Supports. Also, I had a really amazing special ed teacher last year that I got to work with, and she taught me to use these boxes and fill them with examples of things of what you're looking for, because a lot of students need these supports and scaffolds. And she reminded me that for many students, I want the final product, right? I want them to think about something and create something that is their own. That's my goal. Think, create, imagine, ideate. So if I help them articulate the process in their head, am I invalidating the process? No. Am I helping them articulate something that's already there? Yes. That's what's important. This other piece of scaffolding is planning scaffolding as well, and it has, you can see, or maybe not, depending on how amazing your eyes are. It's a list of every material in the room, so that when they're planning, it's not just a blank spot. I'm going to use blank spot. What's going to be there? So instead, I have this list of options for them. Again, it's that same idea. Am I testing their ability to remember every object in the room? Or do I want them to think about what object they are going to use? I don't care if they can remember everything in the room. I do care if they make a decision and pick an object. I also ask them to plan and test. So this kind of covers that idea of some kids are not really ready to do this, sketch their thing. That's not every kid's process. It's not going to be good for every kid. If I say, please make 4 sketches of your project before I allow you to start. Not every artist works that way. Instead, some like to play and practice. And so we have sheets for that. I'm really big on the worksheet. I have sheets for everything. Like, oh, your project's going to be late? No problem. I have an extension form. Go fill it out. I'm really big on the sheets. Because for my population, and all of you have at-risk children in your room, it's just a matter of concentration, worksheets make our thinking visible. And for kids who are missing the building blocks of their thinking, they now have it in front of them to help them make their thinking visible and to build it. Eventually, they're never going to need any of this. They won't need these sheets, who cares? But they're not ready for that yet. So we'll do it for them, no problem. I kind of went on a support structure binge, apparently. I I was really nervous that everyone was going to be like, oh my god, why didn't you talk about structures? So I also have this example over on the right. Oh my gosh, it's the left, you guys. I just figured it out. The experiment planning timeline. Some kids are great at managing their time. Amazing at it. You say, hey, I would like a piece of artwork in 2 weeks, they go, awesome. And you don't see them for 2 weeks, and then they show up with everything, and it's amazing. Some kids, 2 weeks goes by, and they're like pulling some crumpled, dirty piece of paper out of their pocket, and they're like, this is all I got done. I don't know what happened all that time. So, for my students that need a little bit of help planning their time, I have different versions of how you should use your time over the course of 2 weeks. And some of them prefer it in a checklist form. This is another product of being an at-risk student and being constantly under stress. Your brain cannot manage your time for you. Your brain is busy going, oh my god, stay alive, oh my god, stay alive, stay alive, stay alive, stay alive. There's no way you're going to be like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do some sketching, and then by Wednesday, I would totally like to have my first draft started. No, that's not going to happen. So I make this little sheet for them, and I give them a checklist. By this day, you might want to have these things done, or you could do all these things in any order you choose, but make sure you're getting a certain number of them done a day. There's different levels of this, of course. This one is very specific. On Tuesday, you need to do your research. On Wednesday, you should start a first draft and or start testing materials. Some kids love this. They're like, oh my god, thank you. Now they can concentrate on making their work. Imagine that. They don't have to worry about, oh, holy crap, how am I going to spend my time? You've told them how they're going to spend their time, because time management is a really important skill, absolutely. It's a skill we have to learn. Just saying. Skill building is super important. I know I touched on this briefly. I'm going to try to speed up. I don't know how many slides I have left, and this does not tell me. But we do a lot of skill building. We have a skill building day once a week. I see my kids, I'm very fortunate, every day, all year long. It's wonderful. That said, I also have rolling enrollment. So sometimes I have a kid that shows up 6 months into the year, and I'm like, oh, you don't know what's going on. So we do these skill buildings, and it's just exactly like you would expect it. Pick a skill that everyone in the room is freaking out over, and teach it on a one-day lesson. Don't worry about, oh my god, is this tab? Oh my god, is it not? Oh my god, they don't have free choice. They need the skill. They need to learn it. It could be a 15-minute practice. They have the skill? Awesome. High five. Go play. You don't have the skill? Let's take a little bit longer on it. But skill building is so important for our children who are at risk, because they don't have them and they're not going to be able to acquire them on their own, because again, their brain is going, holy cow, I need to survive. And that's all it's doing. They're never going to go to the library on their own and pick up this book and be like, oh my god, I think I learned knitting. I think I can YouTube it. Not on their own. They need those supports. We need to help them have those supports. Is it impossible for an at-risk child to learn to skill build on their own? Of course not. It's our job to teach them how to do that. So we'll go to my favorite podium, cultural relevancy. Cultural relevancy is not teaching Frida every year. I'm sorry. She's awesome, but she is not the only woman of color that ever made art. And we get really into her, and she's great. I'm not saying she's not, and you should totally keep her in your rotation, but there are other people that did other stuff. And there are other people doing other stuff right now. And that stuff is so awesome. And your kids are going to be like, oh, that's sick. And that is your goal, right? You want to hear that. I do, anyway. And some people are like, but, Da Vinci's really important. Yes, he is. I'm not going to say he's not. All these guys are really important, and all this work is really important. But how relevant is it to our children? Can we make a bridge to get there? That would be probably a little better. I think it's a little better, and I don't want to be like, oh God, I know everything. I don't. But this is what's worked for me with my kids. When I try to teach a bunch of white people who paint a bunch of white people to a room full of 0 white people, they're like, okay, so that's your art. Good point. I'll be back tomorrow with something else. We can teach these big, awesome ideas with super contemporary, super exciting, not white people artists. Are white people artists bad? No, of course not. They're just not the only guys on the playground. Let's teach a bunch of people. Let's teach all the people. This is Brando. He's a current contemporary Spanish street artist. I taught him to teach Impressionism. I taught him first because he is what's most relevant and most connected to my children. This is the doorway. You open the door, and then you walk up the stairs, and there's Impressionism, French Impressionism. Da! And guess what? They're like, oh yeah, I see those really short brushstrokes. That's cool. I see how it's emotive. And I'm not making that up. I just did this, like the last 2 weeks because we're going to see the French Impressionist show with the French teacher, and she's super pumped, and I was like, I don't know how that's going to go, because, yeah. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll pregame that with some contemporary Impressionists. Those happen, right? So I Googled juxtapose the magazine plus Impressionism, and this was the first hit. And I was like, yes, win. So we did Brando for a week, and then we just did a Russian artist, Kinchev, who is also doing contemporary Impressionism, and it's super radical, and you should all check it out. If you Google contemporary Impressionism, some really awesome stuff happens. If you Pinterest contemporary Impressionism, some super awesome stuff happens. Is it important that it follows all of the exact, precise, I don't see a whole lot of wet into wet brushstrokes on that first one? You're right. But let's talk about the ideas of Impressionism, and then let's backtrack, so that when kids get to your big Monet haystacks in the evening winter sun, they're not like, what's a haystack? Instead, they can be like, oh, yeah, I get that, like, cool light and, not really clear painting, and it's cool because it doesn't have to be perfect, which was an exit ticket that I had on Friday. I get Impressionism because it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, that's a connection to your real life. I also taught Nosko a couple of months ago. Big hit. He's really into taxidermy. Middle school and high school, they love stuff like taxidermy. We talked a lot about that. It's so important to bring new, exciting, fresh stuff into the room. Nobody really does backflips over a haystack. I mean, maybe somebody, but I don't know. I appreciate it, I value it, I'm excited to go see it, but I'm not like, oh my God, this is so cool. It's just not there for me. And it's definitely not there for a 16-year-old who's like, what the fuck is this? So I'll sort of slow down and try to, I know we're a little bit past my time, but, so I just want to leave you guys knowing you should feel confident in approaching any at-risk child, but know that you have to do it 100%. There's no halfway with these babies. They've had halfway all their life. It's time to give them something more than halfway. And I'll give you this little story about neither one of these guys, although, gosh, I miss my friend Juan there. I had him for 3 years of high school, and when I say 3 years of high school, I mean 3 senior years of high school. And he would come to me every day after school, high as a kite, and be like, yeah, miss, I just want to talk about life. He'd be like, hey, Juan, so not about your grade then, or anything else? You gotta love them. You gotta love them for who they are. So So I have this kid, and let me backtrack. I went to a PD about a month ago, and the woman in the PD was blah, blah, blah about cultural diversity, and I was like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. I need to do some lesson planning, not really this. And she was talking, and then she had us make a list of the children in our room that we had the lowest expectations for. She said, make this list of 5 kids that are your students. And I would encourage you to do this. You don't need to do this right now. But pull up a mental list. Who are these kids that you have the lowest expectations for? You expect them to fail. They're not going to pass your class. You know it already. Who are these kids? Once you've made that list, think about why. What's going wrong there? And, I could only pull one kid up on my list. Because there was this kid that had only been in my class like 3 times. And every time he would come and he would sit in the back. He was a flight. He was a sneak. He would sit in the back of the class and be like, on his phone, until I come over, and then he'd be like, can I go to the bathroom? Like, the second I was in range. Can I go to the bathroom? Okay. Something about me makes you need to pee. So, I was like, this kid's not going to pass me. There's no way. He's only been here 3 times. He's missed 45 classes. There's no way he's going to pass. So I wrote him down. And then the whole night I was like haunted by this. How can I have a child that I have a low expectation for? Who am I? This goes against everything in my soul, my fiber. I thought I was not going to be able to write a name down. Oh, I hate myself. So the next morning, he happened to show up. It was just a total fluke. And so he sat down in the room as usual. And so I walked up to him. I said, hi, Kane. How are you? And he goes, what? How are you? How was your weekend? No, it's all right. Yeah? What'd you do? Oh, I snowboarded. I don't know. That sounds awesome. Where'd you go? And we went on like this for 5 minutes. And I just put myself mentally, I was like, imagine this is like the best conversation you've ever had, Keziah. Be so into it, be so present, be 100%. I don't care how he responds. Be like, really? That sounds awesome. Excuse my mouth. I have a filthy mouth. I spend time with a lot of filthy mouth children. I'm sorry. Please don't be offended. So after about like 10 minutes of this just friendly banter, I said, hey, Kane, I'd love to talk about your grade. Do you want to talk about that? And he's like, not really. Well, how about we can talk about art? And he's like, I don't really like art, miss. Okay, why not? He's like, I just don't really get it. I don't know how to do it. Okay. Well, would you like to learn? I was like, well, I do really like street art. I said, awesome. I have this book that's called How to Be the Best Bubble Writer in the World. Would you like to read it? And he's like, yeah. Awesome. And since then, his attendance has improved by about 75%. And he has worked not 100% of the class, but about 45 minutes out of 60, all of the times that he's been in. He just needed to know that I cared, that I was there, that I was present, that I wasn't going to yell at him, that I didn't hate him for not being around, that I didn't think he was stupid, that I was just going to be there. That's all it took. It's not perfect. He's not 100%. He's not suddenly got an A. That's not the goal. He just needed a support. So I guess I'll finish with that, because that probably took up my 10 minutes. Sorry. So I did leave space for questions, but I don't know if people are going to have questions. Yeah. Nobody has a question.
I have one. Sometimes I'm trying to encourage a student who's thinking negatively, or like lacking confidence, and they don't believe me when I tell them their art is nice or it shaded that well. I was wondering what kind of advice you give.
That's kind of a multiple-pronged question. One is always make sure that your feedback is sincere and specific. And that's something that we all know, but it's very hard to remember in the moment. When some kid is like, oh, miss, I'm done, you're like, that's so great. Good job. And then you move to your other 25 kids in the room who are bouncing off the walls. Specifics mean honesty. So if you can pick out, like, that shading in that corner is really strong. And I honestly feel like kids respond to not just positives, but positives and constructive criticism, because it's more honest. So if you say something like, I really love your overall composition and I really love your use of color in this corner, I think that the piece would maybe be enhanced by repeating this color in one other spot. That helps them know you're actually looking at their work. You're not just telling them, yeah, good job, and this is fine. Next. They need to know that there's a real personal connection and you're actually evaluating their work. It sounds like you're going to lose them if you give them something negative, but it actually keys them into the fact that you actually thought about what was on the table in front of them and in front of you, and didn't just say, good job, nice. They don't need more empty promises or platitudes. That's not helpful. So we can't actually bolster a child's confidence by telling them great job 25 times. As we have learned by the fact that everybody gets a ribbon at every event now, nobody's feeling particularly positive after they're not feeling like they did a good job. Constructive criticism is real feedback and it helps them.
Yes.
Yes?
This kind of goes with it, but when you said at the beginning, don't just say, just try.
Yes.
This young man who, okay, he wants to do bubble letters, but when you do a skill builder, what do you say to him when he's like, oh gosh, I have to do that skill builder?
That is a very, it's an excellent question, and it's a very tricky area because there are so many kids with a very tender ego. I don't know that skill builders are honestly for everyone, and I'm actually been this year toying with the idea of choice skill builders. So my big experiment, and I can't give you any feedback on it yet, is to have a wall of skill builders that they can choose based on difficulty and patience levels. And they'll choose the skill builder that they feel is appropriate for them based on their abilities and their patient levels. And their interest levels, and then they can build that particular skill independently. And that way it gives them, and that was built specifically for that instance because I felt like there were kids who would just avoid the skill builders, not come to class that day, or initiate some horrific event in the room because they did not want to do that one thing. So I think trying to build that choice into those skill builders has alleviated some of that, although I have no long-term data on that.
When you say wall, like skill building wall, you had another one, you really mean like a center?
No, I mean a wall. I don't actually have centers at the high school level, and I know that's like an anathema to elementary tab, where you're like, whoa. But for my experience at the high school level, I don't feel like centers are super developmentally appropriate. So instead, we have access to the materials, and they return, and like an adult studio would look. We wouldn't keep our materials in centers in an adult studio. And since we are working with young adults, we keep it like a studio would look. So there's that. But the skill building is a big poster that I have on the wall, and it has examples of the images along with the difficulty and patience ratings. And then they just pick the one that they want, and they pull the instruction card and go through the instructions with my facilitation. So, yes?
I actually think this is fantastic. I have a class of about 28. I have about 6 boys in there. One who is very high at risk. The other 5 are as well. And then I have high achievers on one side, and then my 6 on this other side, and 2 are very violent. Do you have any advice? The skill building wall, I think, is like an aha thing for me, because of the one boy doesn't. You know, he's fabulous when he sits down and creates something. There's a lot of times he doesn't have the energy, the tools to create or to want. So he'll ask me, "Can I sweep the room?
Yeah.
Can I move your boxes? Can I?" So the skill building wall would be great. But you sound like you have dealt with some pretty violent students as well. Do you have anything or any quick tip that you could use?
I think body language is really important. I did a class when I was in DC. They really prep you for a lot in DC because it's real intense down there. But one of the things we learned was to always take a side body stance with a child who is super upset. You don't want to look aggressive or offensive. I'm very tall, so if a child's about to pop off, I tend to lower myself a little bit so that they don't feel like they need to fight me. But it's also very situation specific. I do have situations where I need to dominate because I need them to feel like I'm more dominant than them so that they'll back down. So I think that that's over time. You have to decide, like, do I need to diffuse the situation or do I need to dominate the situation? And which one will get me the result that I want. Some kids are not naturally dominant. They're just blowing steam and they need someone else to be like, hey, that's enough, sit down. And other kids need me to be like, wow, dude, you're really intense. Do you need a walk or something? You know, from the side. It's just dependent on the child. Anyone else?
Ashley is just perfect.
Thank you.